UFC 248 sees Israel Adesanya taking on Yoel Romero. Now, I can't tell you how excited I was to see this card. And obviously, this was an amazing card. It was a really stacked card. You had the likes of Sugar Sean O'Malley, Benil Dariush. Can we not speak about the women's fight? How that really goes and vaults itself up into be a top 5 fight of the year. But you know what? I was actually really excited to see Izzy take on Yoel. And Yoel Romero is a figment of our imagination. He is exactly who we want to look like when we turn around 40 years old. But I think there are a lot of things to take into consideration here. And really, a lot of times MMA pundits, the Joe Rogans of the world and ESPN commentators can really fall into a narrative of overhyping fighters up. Is Israel Adesanya currently in that mix of fighters? I'm not too sure. I don't think so. I think he really is a special and unique talent. Yoel Romero, however, is an interesting character in that he generally possesses the skills, the physical lore, and the fighting style to make him a really exciting fighter. And the fact of the matter is, for an individual coming off a loss to Paulo Costa, he did not deserve to have this title fight. But Izzy took him on his challenge, and Izzy called him out, a thing that he didn't have to do. So really, Yoel Romero came into this fight not really having deserved it or really gone up the normal gamut or the normal weight for a championship fight. But that being said, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant in the case that people love Yoel Romero. He comes in, the big behemoth that he is, talking as very little sense as he does in his rambly sort of tone. But physically, what's a fact is Yoel Romero is an Olympic caliber wrestler, a silver medalist at his particular time. And really, with that physical gifts that he possesses, the biggest confusion point is the fact that he doesn't take a lot of his fights to the ground. In fact, one would seemingly say that he's a victim of his own success in terms of how much damage he can kind of input, and the fact that his finishes, when they happen, are extremely ferocious and extremely entertaining to watch. And this is the version of Yoel Romero that people want to see. Look, enter Israel Adesanya, who is the biggest star, if not the rising star in the UFC, calling out Yoel Romero, and you see a clash of titans in individuals and with really different, distinct fighting styles. And I think this really hyped up a match, that I was personally really in the pocket to watch and see and was really excited about. And really coming off the Wei Ling Zhang and Joanna, I'm terrible with the pronunciations, but the women's strawweight championship fight, that was an amazing fight. And please click on the link above to see the review and analysis there. By the way, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel below and it'll help support the channel. But I think that the guys walked into a fight that they really had a lot to lose, in the sense that it was very hard to match the energy that the two women kind of poured out there. And really, coming into the first round, I was very hyped up, and it just didn't live up to the expectation. And the interesting thing is, we're willing to give the fighters that we love consistent chances to perform. So what do I mean by that? Yoel Romero, time and time again, has kind of, in a very similar career trajectory and arc, being like Joseph Benavidez in the fact that he's been there. He's fought for the championship a couple of times, and at age 42, you'd think that this was one of his last chances to roll the dice. So you'd think that with that urgency and the fact that he probably didn't deserve the opportunity to fight for the championship, he'd come out with urgency. No, he doesn't. He comes in the behemoth that he does, holding his hands with I can't even describe what sort of style that is. It's definitely not an iteration of Muay Thai of sorts, but basically with a closed arm shell. And interestingly enough, both Izzy and Yoel, for at least 2 minutes and a half, engage in this staring battle at each other. You know what I'm saying? No action, almost zero to no action. And I think, interestingly enough, we're still, at least at that time, I was with my fiance watching the fight, and I was saying, you know what? this is high stakes chess, babe. Like this is poker. This is if you blink, you're gonna get knocked the fuck out. So absolutely, take your time, take as much time as you're willing to do. Noting that this is a 5 round fight. You know, it's a championship fight. Yoel Romero is notorious for gassing on his tank. So I thought there was a grander scheme, or there was a grander plan at play. And the thing with Yoel Romero is at any one time, you're willing to give him the benefit of the doubt because time and time again he has proved it. But like, if you want to roll the dice, if Yoel Romero was a stock, he'd be the most highly volatile stock you've ever chosen on. High risk, high reward. That's Yoel Romero. And I'm not too sure what the pundits were paying, or the bookies were paying, but obviously he was the underdog in this particular fight, and rightly so. I think what was interesting here is Israel Adesanya has fought an iteration of this sort of fight before, and that was when he fought Anderson Silva. In that it does seem that Izzy fights to the level of the individuals that he's fighting to. And we've seen some amazing fights by Izzy. Kevin Gastelum obviously comes to mind. Robert Whittaker was a great fight. He's definitely, in terms of his striking repertoire, and Luke Thomas has brought this out in an analysis of his fights. The whole city kickboxing guys, they're amazing at feints, and you saw iterations of that, and a lot of it actually by both fighters in the first round, which was really interesting. And it seemed like this. It seems like for Izzy's fights, and this is interesting because this is really going to play as to how entertaining he is, given that he does fight to the level of his opponents. If he is an extreme counter striker by virtue of his fighting technique and style, rather, it really means that for the UFC to have, an entertaining fight with him, they need to pair him with someone that's going to initiate. And obviously, insert Paulo Costa here. That has the markings of a really amazing fight. But he really wasn't willing to take that risk and engage. And why would you? Like, logically, why would you with a guy such as Yoel Romero, rather? And Yoel did strike him with an overhand early on in the first round, and he tasted it. He did get rocked back, and I think throughout the period of the fights, there were elements of that occurring in sporadic fashion, to say the least. Round 2 happens, and we get much of the same, and this is where it kind of gets really interesting. I think upon round 3, the ref comes in and says, "Hey guys, you need." Actually, that's in the beginning of round 4. The ref Dan comes in and says, "Guys, we need to get some action on the board." And really, I think there was at this stage, when you're in the third round of a championship fight and you've seen as little action as you've seen, contrasted to the fact that you've seen probably the best fight of the year, regardless of gender, by the women there. You're absolutely bamboozled at what you're watching in terms of a product. Like the card was built around these two fights, and Adesanya and Romero were top billing really in this particular regard, and it's not delivering. And I can't for one remember a card where the guys just didn't perform, for lack of a better term. Izzy wasn't willing to take the extreme risks to lose his title, and Yoel, I think the onus really is almost always on the challenger in a lot of times, and hence why we have criticism. I hate using the word, but most of the lens is focused on Yoel, in terms of the fact that he probably he had the most to lose. Well, that's an interesting statement, but he had the most to gain, rather. Actually, he definitely had the most to gain, but he really wasn't interested in engaging. And one really needs to think, like, why was that the case? Like, he's 42 years old and is an amazing physical specimen in his own regard. Is Father Time catching up in terms of his ability to explode, and cause the flurries of damage that made him so devastating a fighter in the last couple of years? Is that the case? Does he have the will? Does he have the explosion? And what we need to understand is, throughout the fight, Izzy peppered his legs, and at the back end of the fight, I'll try and see if I can bring up a photo. You saw an amazing amounts of welts on Yoel's thigh, and obviously that had to play some part. But it's an interesting fight, and there's not a lot that I can kind of add in terms of the analysis. The fourth round was more or less the same. I think in the third and fourth round, you saw Izzy really coming to his own, especially with the leg kicks. And this was, And a fighter of Izzy's caliber, and especially, Counter Strike in that regard, simply touching opponents in terms of laying consistent hits is going to get him away with the fight, especially for as how long the length in which Adesanya fights upon. And he came often to that leg kick, and it was very apparent. But yes, it's absolutely bamboozling to understand, just to see the lack of urgency. Coming into the fifth round, we still see this lack. Obviously, in the fourth and the fifth round, Yoel did turn it up, and I actually had Yoel winning the fifth round by virtue of the amount of activity that he had and the punches that he had. But it either seemed that he didn't have the explosion, and it's very hard to get a very succinct articulation out from Yoel, and I've yet to hear any interview that upon which he makes commentary to some sort of compromise from a physical perspective, which could definitely be the case. I mean, we're not the ones in the ring, so we don't know. But he just appeared really lackadaisical. And I think it's really interesting when you go into the corners, and obviously the guys were talking, in a different language to English and potentially in Cuban, to hear the sort of advice that the corners kind of give, because it looked like there was a lot of fighter treatment, which is really important between rounds, but not a lot of advice. Say what you want about Izzy, and to be honest, it takes two to tango. I've heard that statement a lot, and it is a fact, and it is true. Izzy definitely didn't help in that particular regard, but yeah, just absolutely perplexing in this particular regard. So, Yoel came in with a couple of overhands. He did look sluggish. I think throughout the fight, he was taking a lot of swings and missing, and such is the elusiveness of Adesanya. And what we've got to understand and appreciate is this is a fight. But the definition of fight is a lot of different things for a lot of different fighters. And at the conclusion of the fight, you probably get some of the best sort of action from the entire fight. They conclude with a bit of a flurry in terms of Romero. Romero goes up to Izzy. He yells at him. Izzy yells back. There's a lot of posturing going on, and thus concludes what was a fight that didn't have a lot of action. Again, especially when contrasted to the women's fight earlier there, and left a lot of commentators perplexed. I mean, myself included. I think it's really interesting, and there are a couple of ways to look at it. And one is, every once in a while you're gonna see fights like this in the UFC. It happens, and especially when you have two fighters that have that propensity to scale on the extremes. Meaning that if Israel Adesanya fights to the level of his opponents, which potentially we didn't quite pick on, but is quite I wouldn't say quite apparent, but like, he definitely wasn't willing to take the risks. There was a lot of high stakes, and this is fair. It gets to a point where there's so much to lose that you are sometimes playing to win playing not to lose as opposed to winning. And there's no doubt that a manifestation of that happened with Izzy. That's facts, according to me, rather. But Yoel Romero, you'd have to think, for a guy that had nothing to lose and everything to gain, there would be been some level of urgency there. And it's always kind of boggled my mind why a lot of fighters don't necessarily leave it out on the cage, especially if it looks like they're going to lose. And did he generally think that he was ahead on the scoreboard? Yoel Romero does seem to be, the fact of the matter is, everyone loves Yoel Romero, and that's why he's gained the longevity that he has in the UFC and potentially gotten this fight. Apart from, let's keep it real, the fact that he is a great fighter in his own sort of regard. But I don't know where he comes back from this, to be honest. And as soon as I was willing to give him, and as commentators and as pundits, everyone's willing to give fighters a little bit of rope and a bit of slack. And I was definitely willing to give it to him in rounds 1 and 2. But in 3 and 4 and 5, when nothing was happening, man, that was disappointing. It was absolutely disappointing. You can't keep... You're kind of hoping, you're kind of on edge because you've seen this from Romero in the past. But, man, where does he go from here? It's very hard to... I knew that Dana would not like it. And true to form, on his, on his post-fight interviews, Dana was livid. He said it was a shit fight. And and specifically it was just pointing the trigger at Romero and his lack of input and energy. And I think Daniel Cormier, he noted it very well on the commentary team, is that, mate, if you're gonna fight like that, you can't expect to kick up a storm, right? And what's interesting is at the conclusion when Yoel was being interviewed by Joe Rogan, he generally thought, yeah, sorry, it's not that he generally thought that he had won, but he was commentating about the fact that Izzy wasn't meeting him in the center of the octagon and banging. And mate, I hate to pull it on you, especially from a guy that hasn't fought at a professional level. I can't communicate there, in that I definitely don't have those accolades. But what I can say is it's a fighting championship, and fighting in this modern era encompasses a lot of different things, not simply just standing in the middle of banging. And granted, that is what the majority of us do want to see, a good old-fashioned gunfight. But you'll have fighters of the likes of Israel Adesanya, and that's what makes him so unique and so great to watch, that have that amazing elusiveness, that counter-strike beautifully. That combination that he put in Robert Whittaker was sweet. It was akin to like a boxing combination. You can't blame a guy for using his natural tools and fighting in the way that he fights. And I think that's what was very hard to hear Yoel talk. Definitely understand where he's coming from, but it takes two to tango, and you didn't engage in that particular regard as well, right? So, look, yeah, it was an interesting co-main fight. I think the ladies definitely took it, ran away in terms of performance of the night. Another one was Benel Darush. I hope I'm getting that pronunciation right, but he had an amazing finish. That was a great fight as well. Look, overall, it was a pretty good card. And obviously, if your end fight leaves you at that particular level and you're kind of deflated, it is what it is. But that doesn't take away that we saw the best fight of the year with the two ladies in Joanna and Wei Ling. And a pretty sort of solid card. So look, moving forward, there were a lot of little tidbits that occurred in this fight, in this card. Paulo Costa slots in naturally, and I think there is a bit of, look, these are growing pains for Izzy as well. Like, all champions are gonna have fights like this, insert Tyron Woodley, in the sense that you're gonna have fights where the people are not gonna like you. And I think Izzy is a very divisive character. There's no doubt. There's a large chunk of people, myself included, that are huge Izzy fans, like really huge Izzy fans. His personality, especially to the North American audience, they're going to love that shit. They're absolutely going to eat him up. But at the same time, he's an extremely cocky, sort of confident character, which is going to rub a lot of people the wrong way, especially if you can't deliver. And for some people, and John Jones is facing this now, winning is simply not delivering. You need to win in devastating fashion, especially if you talk that level of smack, or that if you just basically talk in that manner that Izzy does. So, look, it's really going to be interesting. The Paulo Costa, I think he's going to come in with the mentality that he probably needs to finish it, potentially, or at least give a good show there. I think the dynamics in how these individuals fight and the narrative that they're going to build, because they obviously hate each other's guts, don't know why, is going to play into it. So, look, it's really interesting. And as for Yoel Romero, I have no idea where he goes from here, to be quite frank. He could play that Czech Congo role as a guardian in the middle in this weight class. And there's definitely a role there. People still want to see him. I think the days of him headlining cards are over. I generally think that. I think that he can't keep up from a marketing perspective to some of these younger cats. And really, even if he fought, if he KO'd, a couple of guys, if you're Dana White, you're thinking in the back of your mind, man, this guy has shown me that historically the propensity to absolutely bomb out. Like, he's 42 years old. Does it make business sense giving him that sort of opportunity? It's interesting because when you have a dud fight in the middle of a card, it can kind of be saved, right? But when you have a dud fight at the end of the card, man, it's like having the best degustation menu and ending with a shit dessert. That punctuation point isn't there. Look, that's my little analysis. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave some comments below, and guys, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Chat soon, and Peace.